Good afternoon and good day from Dubai. My name is Trevor Pereira and I'm the founder managing director of the Maritime Standard. From all of us here at TMS, I take this opportunity to wish all the panelists, our audience tuning in, and this wonderful industry that we all belong to, a happy, safe, and a healthy 2021. We've had quite an eventful 2020 and I hope the worst is past us. But I must add that amongst all the doom and gloom in 2020, TMS still had 500 industry executives gathering, not virtually, but in person at the Dubai World Trade Center for the Maritime Standard Awards. And the following day, another 150 in the ballroom and 500 online for the Maritime Standard Tanker Conference, the first hybrid conference of its kind. We did this not because we are better or smarter than the others. We did this because we belong to a resilient industry, the one that is in the midst of braving the harshest pandemic seen by humankind in decades. Where our brothers and sisters still ply the seas under duress, making sure the vast majority of the world has its basic essentials of food and medicine delivered to their doorstep. With the various vaccines now available, I'm sure we can all agree that the future is indeed ahead of us and that there is light at the end of the tunnel. To deliberate this and more, may I please welcome our panel of experts to a session opener, session 13 of the TMS webinar series. And here they are: Mrs. Joshi, the Chairperson of the Shipping Corporation of India; Mr. Ali Shehab, the CEO of KOTC; Mr. Ibrahim Al Nadhairi, the CEO of Oman Shipping and Oman Drydocks Company; Mr. Nasser Al Busaeedi, the Deputy CEO of COSCO Terminals, Abu Dhabi; Mr. Petros Doukas, the Deputy CEO of COSCO, Deputy Finance and Foreign Affairs Minister of Greece and the current Mayor of Sparta; Mr. Chris Greenwood, Regional Director of ABS, and the Editor of the Maritime Standard, and your moderator, Mr. Clive Woodbridge. Over to you, Clive.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and welcome to all our distinguished speakers. Very glad to have you with us. And also thank you very much to our audience. I know we have several hundred people tuned in online, and welcome to you wherever you may be. I hope you enjoy the session that we have in front of you. Also, I'd like to say a quick word of thanks to our sponsors who enable these events to take place: Abu Dhabi Ports, ADNOC Logistics and Services, and CSP Abu Dhabi Terminals. As Trevor has said, we've just been through a year of unparalleled challenges, and they continue. Yesterday in the UK, we reached the tragic milestone of 100,000 people who sadly passed away from COVID-19. And few of us will not know somebody or have been infected directly ourselves by this terrible disease. Indeed, yesterday I learned of the death of Essam Bella, of Clarkson's, who'd been a well-known figure on the Dubai and the Middle East shipping scene for decades, somebody that Trevor and I had met on a number of occasions, and he sadly passed away. So our thoughts go to his colleagues, friends and family at this difficult time. Yeah, although it's still a very gloomy, very challenging situation, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. Across the world, vaccines are being rolled out. In shipping in particular, there are some signs of recovery in certain trades, and people are talking about a roaring 20s type recovery once the worst of the pandemic is over. So the question we putting to our panelists today really is 2021 a year of opportunity, or is it going to be just a rerun of 2020? So I'll start off by asking each of the panelists that very simple question, and perhaps they could answer in a minute or two. So I'll start with Mrs. Joshi. Do you view 2021 as a year of opportunity?
A very good afternoon to all our viewers as well as to my co-panelists. I would first like to begin by thanking the Maritime Standard for kick-starting this new year with a very, very relevant subject, and the subject itself is 2021, a year of opportunities. So, Mr. Clive, my take on that is that opportunity is always looming round the corner and we just need to see it. So there are never any dearth of opportunities, and challenges are or problems only are another name of opportunities. So I'm sure 2021 is going to bring out a host of opportunities for us, and we need to be alert and be able to grab them as they come. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Joshi. Ali Shehab, how do you see things from your base in Kuwait and in the tanker industry? Is the year ahead one with opportunities, or are you a bit more downbeat?
I think we're going to have a rough road ahead. As you mentioned about the pandemic and how the COVID situation is developing, 13 months with over 100 million cases and 2 million unfortunate deaths. When we look at that situation and what did it result so far, downturn in economy, downturn in trade, there are so many other factors which we will talk about later. But light at the end of the tunnel, we can see it, but it's really, it's a long way to reach. And simply is how do you get out of the COVID situation is the vaccine. And then how fast can you get people vaccinated? That's yet to be seen. There's a lot of hurdles in the way, supplies, logistics, various capabilities, and unfortunately also some parts of the world are able to receive the vaccine, other parts of the world are not able to receive the vaccine. So when you put all this together, and then, you know, I don't see that there is, you know, situation is better in 2021. We're going to continue to suffer, unfortunately. I'm not very pessimistic. There is also a good side into the to the situation, but we can talk about it later. But as far as overall situation compared to 2019, there is a lot to happen, and 21 is not going to be the year that rebound is going to take place.
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. Ibrahim Al Nadhairi, how do you see things? What's your view of the year ahead?
Well, okay. Thank you, Clive, and the team. It's basically cyclicity is a natural part of the shipping industry, and the expectation for the trade to improve and stabilize after the vaccine is reached the masses. I think we should be a little bit more optimistic, of course. I mean, when it comes, like, if we just take it on the areas where we operate, for example, we see that maybe the dry bulk segment and the container segment, they have improved. And hopefully by the end of Q2, we'll get the good results where it will indicate how profitable the 2021 would be. I mean, we think it's still that the container carriers will remain profitable in 2021. We've seen good results now. Though, of course, when it comes to the chartering of container ships, it has been very challenging. I think maybe container ships owners, they want to make up for the losses over the last few years. But all in all, it's good. And I also agree with Ali there. The tanker market is set for some critical capacity management in 2021. And of course, the weaker freight rates that have snapped enthusiasm for any new orders, for example. And this will, of course, affect the supply of the ship. And we expect still the oversupply of older ships will still be there. And it will, however, it could accelerate scrapping. But then going forward, we expect this thing is going to be improved. And while oil demand is likely to bounce back, hopefully by early or towards Q3, Q4 this year, it is unlikely to reach the 2019 levels for at least the coming 12 months.
Okay.
And that's it basically in a nutshell. Of course, we'll discuss more in details later on.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim. That's very useful. Nasser Al Busaeedi from the ports industry. When you're looking ahead to 2021, do you see a year of opportunity or something a little bit more challenging?
Well, what we have seen and went through the last year, it was a quite challenging time. At the same time, it was a learning curve for us, and having the systems in place that are going to solve the movement of the cargo between the terminal, between the local trade, international trade as well. But honestly speaking, with the system which has been implemented locally in UAE, it has supported us a lot in having the container movement without disruption. Today, we have reached around 1 million TEUs handling in the terminal since the commencement date, with 2 million safe working hours. And this came during the pandemic itself, I mean, during 2020. Now, looking at 2021, yes, the pandemic going to still be there. Maybe the supply and demand will go down a bit, but the terminals will continue performing with the high performance and as the trade expects.
Okay, thank you very much, Nasser, for those words. Coming now to Petros Doukas, again from a very different perspective, somebody sitting in Greece, perhaps looking at the world with a slightly different perspective. What do you see in the year ahead when you look in your crystal ball?
First of all, Clive and Trevor, congratulations for another great event and bringing so many great personalities together and keeping us all alive. It's going to be a very, very tough year, but the tough years are also the years of opportunity. This is where you can actually position yourself and use the tough year as a springboard to grow. Now, to take full advantage of these opportunities in a tough year, you have to have some characteristics. The first thing is to be able to deploy high technology in all aspects of your business. So being high tech to whatever degree science allows you and technology allows you is going to be of paramount importance, both in production and distribution and marketing and sales. Across the board, you have to be high tech. You have to keep costs really at a minimum. High cost players will have a much harder time than those who have squeezed the cost. Third characteristic, you need to have adequate capital. It's one thing if you're constantly striving to repay your debts, and it's another if you have capital to be able to acquire opportunities that come around. Opportunities could be a weaker competitor, for example. And the last characteristic should be a good brand name. People in the market should talk highly about you. You should be credible. The interesting part of this whole exercise is that when it's over, we will have in every industry fewer competitors. So if you are one of the strong survivors because you did things right and you had capital to allow you to take care of the hard times, when you emerge from this crisis, competition is going to be less, weaker. You're going to be in a better position to hold a bigger market share. So less competition, but you need to do things right from the beginning. So my feeling is, yes, it's going to be a hard time for global trade, for global tourism. Investors are more hesitant to do very, very big deals because they don't know the company they will go out and buy, whether it can weather the very tough storms. But this is exactly the year of opportunity where we should all be ready to take advantage of. So that's my story.
Thank you, Petros. Last but not least, Chris Greenwood. I think classification societies in many respects are ideally placed to have a sort of finger on the pulse of the shipping industry because of the role they play. Do you see 2021 as being one that there are plenty of opportunities to be seized?
Yeah, I think cautious optimism is probably the position that I would describe we're in. Obviously, we've seen varying degrees of difficulty with all of us, both sort of personally and professionally, in dealing with the pandemic, from working at home with young kids like me, or maybe getting the virus yourself, or losing loved ones, or even being stuck at sea. So I think even from a kind of principled perspective, we owe it to ourselves to be optimistic. You know, the world is still very commodity driven, and our demand for things and oil hasn't really waned. So whilst there are obviously fluctuation in rates, 90% of the world's trade is still done by sea. So that's not going to change soon. As Ibrahim mentioned, you know, mass vaccination drives, I think 10% of the UK has been vaccinated already, similar proportion here in the UAE. That's obviously very, very encouraging. Petros kind of alluded to it, but I think the accelerated change that we've seen in the last year, certainly from a digital perspective, is evidence of our ability to pivot and adapt to evolving challenges. You know, Petros mentioned risks such as the pandemic being a catalyst for change, and I totally agree. And I think progression ultimately is a result of disruption to the status quo. Now, that being said, you know, there are certainly challenges in the road ahead, but I think we're pretty resilient and smart as a region, as an industry, and, you know, as a globe. So yeah, I try to err on the side of optimism overall.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. So thank you all for your opening remarks. I think there's slightly differing emphases there, some broadly very optimistic and others less so. But I think, as perhaps Chris summed up at the end there, cautious optimism seems to be the underlying consensus there. So moving on, perhaps to ask each individual panelist some more specific questions. I mean, Mrs. Joshi, I'll come to you first. I mean, SCI had a very good year, last year. In general terms, your financial results were very strong. When you're looking at 2021, what freight rate patterns do you think you'll see, and do you think shipping will be profitable in 2021? Are we going to see a continuation of some of those positive trends that perhaps were a little bit surprising to some people in 2020, sorry.
Mr. Clive, you ask very simple questions, but your questions are loaded with a lot of content as well as intent, I would say. Yeah. And it's not often very easy to answer your questions. And I'm sure that's the reason you are always the chosen moderator for all of us. I couldn't have agreed more with what Mr. Petros Doukas had to say. I think I agree on all the 4 points that he said. But since you are now specific to the shipping industry, I'll talk about on 2 counts. One thing is on the industry. The industry is going to see a lot of volatility, and it depends upon which segment of the industry are you going to be. And definitely there are certain segments which are going to take a substantial hit. As far as the tanker goes, the lookout is definitely not very optimistic. The bulk is started picking up, and things look a little bright on the bulk side. It's the container segments, surprisingly, which has outshone in 2021, and it has beaten all the previous records. And if you see that currently the container in all the trade routes across the world, there is an uptick in the container freight rates, and it is expected that the container-based shipping is going to consolidate itself in the future. And as compared to the tanker, we know we are barely now able to even cover our operating costs, and that is the reason you see a lot of big size tanker vessels now going demolishing. Already we are hearing a lot of VLCCs already progressing towards. So it is going to be a challenging year. So when you ask me whether shipping is going to be profitable in 2021, that's a very leading question. It depends upon which segment you are going to be in. And as far as Shipping Corporation of India is concerned, considering that we are a completely diversified company, and that gives us a distinct advantage that while one segment goes down, there is another segment to fall back upon. So I consider we are going to be profitable in 2021.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Joshi. Coming now to Ali Shehab. We've discussed on this webinar series in the past with you about some of the challenges of the past year. What do you think of the main lessons that the industry has learned from the pandemic in 2020, and what mistakes are we in danger of repeating? In particular, I just wonder, as we have more lockdowns coming on, is the seafarer crew change issues of 2020 going to just resurface, or have we put in place measures that can help? So, what mistakes are we in danger of repeating if we're not careful?
Okay, this industry being fragmented in the way it is, it continues to be so. This is the greatest danger that we have. Today, if you go to the IMO website, what do you see? I can read it for you. IMO Secretary General denounces no crew change clauses. Now, if you go in other maritime publications, what do you see? I have here. Says shipping companies, more than 300 ship owners and charterers join forces to speed up crew change and vaccination. The biggest problem that you're going to have in the future, I mean, if I'm having a problem today with the crew logistics to get them off, and and then, God forbid, if you have to go through an airport that is in the east or in the west or whatever, it's just too much of an agony that you have to do in order for the person. There's a lot of torture actually for him to leave home, go to whichever airport that he can reach to, and then move into the next airport until reaching the destination. It could be a month, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. It depends where. I have somebody that I'm trying to arrange, my team trying to arrange from Europe to go to China, and we're expecting 3 weeks. And then by the time they will join the vessel, they're totally exhausted. Now, the vaccination is the biggest problem in the future. How now the situation on shore, the governments and the states, every state is trying to deal with the situation, get their people vaccinated, but then that part of the industry is totally sort of in standalone. The other part is when I say the industry is very fragmented, is there is no connection. That system should support itself together in order to stand still and face the challenges that are coming ahead. Nobody is immune. Yeah, I mean, I could say, okay, we will do well from here until the end of the year. Our financial standing will be okay. Of course, we are a government company, but when you talk about private companies, etc., it's really difficult. And who's going to be standing until the end? That's a question yet to be seen. But when we look at the different states, different ports in the world, and when we look about how to maintain that healthy trade, and we look at the initiatives that have been started by those ports, those states, and you will not find much really. I'm saying is really to assist the industry. Everybody must come together. This is the mistake that it's been carried over from year to year to year, and it will continue to do so. And the reason is because I mean the industry is very resilient, and it will continue to be so. And all the crises that we've seen in the past, this is the worst, by the way. So the industry managed to survive, but we need to come up with a different model. I don't want to blame any party or anybody. Why are we in this situation? But I think maybe you need a disaster to prove a point. So maybe at the end of this year, mid or towards the end, with all the crises that may be getting worse, i.e. you need a rescue situation, then everybody has to come together and create solution. Again, IMO Secretary General denounces no crew change clauses. What does this tell you? If you go back a few months ago, all the way up to the UN, they have mentioned that the seafarers are, you know, they are in the front line. And many protocol, the protocol that has been issued by the IMO in this regard. So that's in brief my view on the and reply to your answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Ali. That's sobering, but yeah, hopefully people are listening to those somewhere along the line. The political chain of command are listening. Ibrahim, I'd just like to, we spoke a little bit about shipping so far. Obviously, in your particular role, you also supervise the ship repair and conversion activity of the Asyad Group. What prospects do you see in that sector? And I just wonder how the fact that Asyad has shipping and dry docking integrated into one is going to help you over the year ahead.
Well, Clive, see, when it comes to ship repair opportunities, this is going to continue throughout the years. It's whether it's a normal routine maintenance as a dry docking, or if it is an emergency repair. So it's just, it needs to be looked at from both commercial and technical. As we always say, you know, the first ship is bought by commercial, but the rest of the ships are bought by the production, or basically the quality of business being done by the shipyard. I think so in that context, when we look at it, I mean, the impact of COVID is going to be a little bit limited because of the need for this industry. But on the other side, there's also a challenge of having the service engineers attending the repairs, and whether countries are open to receive service engineers, to receive spare parts. From time to time, the airports keep closing, the land borders keep closing. So these are challenges that needs to be dealt with. And then also on top of that, there's a quarantine period. I mean, you can imagine a service engineer who's coming from Europe with 3,000 euros a day, and then you just lock him in a hotel for 2 weeks. And you multiply that by the number of service engineers coming to attend each year. So the cost on the owner side is going to be huge. And at the same time, the repair work needs to be done. So it's a very difficult situation. Both the shipyard is put in as well as the ship owner. And then on the other side, we know that, for example, when it comes to conversion and repairs, large-scale offshore conversion, like FPSOs, the opportunities have lessened. And that is basically because the big players have enough capacities. So maybe now the conversion, in terms of conversion, people like shipyards where we stand, we need to focus like other than offshore conversion. Of course, jackup rigs, these repairs are attractive business. But again, when it comes to this, you need to make sure that you have the right tools to do it. And this is not a one-man show. As Ali just said, and when it comes to crew change, when it comes to service engineers, and when even it comes to the spare parts, you would need to have a full chain together. The supply chain needs to be improved and to be enhanced. Having all these together may lead to a successful shipyard business. There's also one interesting point I'd like to highlight, since we have spoken about the integration between Oman Shipping and Oman Drydock. It's actually a part of a bigger scheme for the group as Asyad. I mean, we will not be surprised if eventually we'll be called like Asyad Shipping or Asyad Drydocking. This is basically the intention of the whole thing. But it's mainly to be done in the shared services in terms of the supply chain and in terms of the HR, the finance, the IT, where we believe that integration can help to economize resources and to provide leaders in different disciplines, and that different challenges and roles, domain expertise can also be brought up. And by doing so, you know, when we have the human resource interchangeability, will help succession planning, and this will also help us to bridge our gaps. And together, putting all these as an opportunity during this time when we had the COVID-19, the pandemic, and we saw the amount of challenges that we are facing, we thought of why not optimizing in our resources and coming up with such a solution, which will also be replicated in the bigger scale for the group itself, as I said.
Those observations. Nasser Al Busaeedi, as we said, I mean, obviously the UAE at the forefront of vaccine rollouts, along with perhaps the UK and Israel, and have got ahead of the curve. What implications do you see of that vaccine rollout for the container shipping and port sector in the region? But what constraints do you think you'll still be operating within, despite this vaccine rollout? So what impact will vaccines have on the business?
To highlight the support of the government and how they have reacted to overcome all the challenges. They have made a lot of campaigns around the UAE to give all over the vaccine to all categories of people who are living within UAE. And actually this one, it helped us a lot in order to maintain the continuity of the business itself and to keep people moving safe between home and the offices or even in the train. Although that we have been noticing that the number of the infected with COVID has started to increase again. But this, based on what has been released, this is mainly based on the people which are in the pipeline to get a vaccine. And you know, the vaccine period, it takes like 21 days to get the 2 shots and then start to affect. But overall, talking to the going back to the subject of changing the crew itself in Khalifa Port, we have seen a small change. At the beginning, there was a little bit challenge, but later on, we've seen that there's a smooth movement of the crews going in and out. So from the terminal perspective, we haven't experienced any challenges that it can give us any threat to, you know, to restrict our movement or running the terminal itself. Maybe we'll need a couple of months till, you know, we cover most of the citizens that, or the people who are living in the UAE with the vaccine. And that one, it may impact a bit to the business as well. But we are in the track trying to manage the situation within the terminal, within the performance of the terminal as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Nasser. Very interesting observations. Petros, just taking us into a slightly different world here with your vast experience in the global and economic field. Obviously, one of the big developments over the last few months has been the election of a new president in the United States, and seemingly a more open willingness to engage with the rest of the world, rather than perhaps the more protectionist, insular approach of the Trump administration. Are you confident that the Biden administration will lead to a reduction in global trade tensions? And is this something that's going to be positive for trade and shipping imports in general, do you think?
Absolutely, yes, you're quite correct, but it's going to be an uphill battle. As the new Secretary of State, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Biden administration said in the Senate last week, he mentioned the problem of the Uyghurs, he mentioned the problem of human rights, he mentioned the problem of Taiwan. There is a war in artificial intelligence competition, and things are going to be very tough. But I think the Biden administration is going to be much more open-minded than the single-mindedness of Donald Trump. So yes, I would expect relationships to steadily improve, because China has become by far the biggest player in the world economy after the United States. Allow me for 20 seconds, Trevor and Clive, to tell you the list of the biggest players in the market, and we have a few surprises. Number one, $21.4 trillion GDP, United States. Number two, $14.3 trillion is China. It's closing the gap with the United States at a very, very rapid pace. And this is what is alarming, of course, the United States. Third, European Union as a whole, 13.4 trillion. Now, from all the numbers that I'm giving, we have to start subtracting 5 to 10% because of COVID. But that's going to be pretty much across the board. So these are the numbers right before the COVID started. The number 4, Japan, $5.1 trillion. Number 5, Germany, 3.8. Number 6, India, 2.9 trillion. Number 7, UK, 2.8 trillion. Number 9, France, 2.7 trillion. Italy, 2.0 trillion. Brazil, 1.9 trillion. And Canada at 1.7 trillion is the same GDP as Russia. It's amazing that Russia is in number 11, 12, which is not compatible with its global superpower status. Russian GDP is less than the sum of Spain plus Belgium. And it's quite surprising because they have a very big global role they're playing, and would be very, very fruitful if Russia came back to the game. Now, these Navalny cases and what have you don't help Russia itself. Sometimes Russia is damaging its own interests. But you have here the top 10 players, and we should really come together and promote freer trade. And I think the Biden administration is set to promote freer trade versus America First policy of Donald Trump. So we will see an improvement there, but it's going to be gradual. It's going to be an uphill battle. It's not going to be easy, but the road is there. The roadblocks are also there, and there are big roadblocks. This commercial war, who will gain the high-tech competition. Artificial intelligence is becoming a major thorny point between the two countries. But I think overall, everybody understands that freer trade promotes human prosperity at all levels. So my answer is yes, we will see improvement, but it's going to be gradual. It's not going to be drastic because the problems are there and are very thorny and are real problems. And the administrations are pretty much the same. The president may change and the outlook may change, but all the subordinate levels are pretty much the public administration is stable. So I do expect, and it's very, very healthy, that we will see improvement. And the improvement is also coming by the defensive measures that the governments have taken. So far, all the governments, Clive and Trevor, have been printing money like crazy. The Federal Reserve is printing money like crazy, and the European Central Bank is printing money like crazy. And why do they print money? Because they want to finance pretty much at zero interest cost the huge deficits that the governments are encountering to counterbalance both the COVID and the reduction in GDPs. So you have the European Central Bank saying to the commercial banks, go out, buy the debt of the governments across Europe, and I will give you money. So a commercial bank can take the debt of one country and discount it at the central bank at pretty much zero interest rate. The same thing with the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. It's printing money to finance the deficit. Now, when I was at the Ministry of Finance, if Greece had a 3.1% of GDP deficit, it was considered virtually a crime. 4 or 5% deficit was also tracked. Now you're talking about 10 to 16 to 17% deficits. The United Kingdom, the budget deficit is almost out of control because that's the only way they can keep the economy alive until we see the next day and say, okay, let me survive first, and then we'll see how we rebalance and we reshuffle and regrow. So this is the way for the economies working now. The same thing in Japan and China. Everybody's doing it. Some are doing it more visibly. Others are doing it below the radar. But central banks are financing the governments so they can finance their huge debts to face the COVID implications. This cannot last forever. You cannot substitute real production and real shipping and real transportation of real goods with printed money, but at least at this point, there's really no other choice. So this has helped keep the economies afloat as much as they are afloat. And from there on, let's say we survive physically and economically, and we take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Petros. You highlight some very key points. I mean, one of my personal concerns is when you learn in the history when people have printed money, inflation usually follows somewhere along the line, including hyperinflation. If you look at sort of Germany, in the early 30s and so on. So I think we have, there's a price to pay somewhere along the line, I think is your message. Chris Greenwood, as I mentioned, I mean, I think a classification society like yours is involved in many different sectors. I think when you're sort of looking at the various shipping sectors like containers, oil and gas, offshore, are you seeing opportunities for growth? And how can companies like ABS sort of help make sure that those opportunities are capitalized upon?
Yeah, so to follow on from the previous question about, optimism looking into 2021, I think there is optimism there. Obviously, the back end of 2020, world GDP rebounded based on relaxations and positive vaccine news, but there's obviously still a lot of uncertainty that remains. The predictions that we have are for single-digit positive gains for GDP and seaboard trade this year versus obviously negative for last year. But in terms of the world fleet, the supply-demand balance continues to recover as the order book to fleet ratio reaches the lows that we've seen. Ultimately, I think for mega trends, regardless of sector, energy transition, decarbonisation, digital, and the trade in developing economies, with all the changes in sustainability initiatives, the industry is still obviously getting to grips with upcoming environmental requirements and the impact of EEXI, carbon intensity, market-based measures, etc. And that's obviously going to create some uncertainty in the new building market until 2023, when we get more details on how these new requirements are going to be implemented. But in saying that, we expect more new orders to be looking at alternative fuels such as LNG, and positioning themselves to be ready for the next generations of fuels such as ammonia. That's obviously something that is big on ABS's radar with alternative fuels. On containers, obviously very slow start to 2021, where the industry was 2020, when the industry was first impacted by COVID lockdowns and layups, as well as route consolidation, which I think was mentioned earlier. But as Ms. Joshi's mentioned, there's marked recovery in the rates, record highs on certain routes. These rates are essentially driven from a lack of containers and blank sailing, managed sailing supply capacity, and restocking of depressed inventories. So I guess we could say that it's created by managing the supply. Container demand is obviously correlated highly to world GDP. So as I mentioned, the growth statistics previously, it should be in line. This is translated to a few orders at the beginning of this year. And we expect to see a range of new building orders in 2021, mainly in the feeder and 12 to 15K TEU sizes. On tankers, yeah, the rates across the board have been chaotic over the last 12 months, and we expect this to continue until we see a real handle on COVID and where world trade and travel can kind of get back to normal. There's some demand for ESG positioning of tonnage providers versus cargo owners, which is obviously impacting things. And we've seen a number of owners take advantage of low shipyard prices at the end of last year, which has translated into a number of new building orders in the last 3 months. On gas, obviously, we've had a very cold winter, mainly in the Far East. So that's impacted LPG and LNG rates as the highs have hit the cold spell in Asia and Europe, as well as restrictions in the Panama Canal. And we really see that both LNG and LPG are going to continue to expand over the next few years, driven by these environmental initiatives from the IMO. The question is, how much new demand will there be over the next few years, with obviously a number of projects waiting to take financial investment decisions. In terms of offshore, offshore sector is expected to remain challenged as the oil demand growth and price continue to be soft in the sort of short to medium term. Long term, energy related offshore activities obviously projected to increase, driven by offshore gas and wind energy developments. For most drillers, as you'll probably know, it's a case of keeping the lights on at the moment, but for the larger NOCs, they're obviously better positioned to weather that storm. So I think we'll continue to see a lot of change in the nature of the offshore market. Obviously, from ABS's perspective, we've got a pretty robust grip on the exploration and production side of things. But we also have some really exciting partnerships with the offshore wind sector. So bottom founded and floating, especially some very exciting projects for US wind, as well as here in the Middle East. One thing that Ibrahim noted, which I just wanted to agree with, it was the increased adoption of vertical integration. So companies taking charge of going to be more prevalent as we move forward.
Well, thank you, Chris. I didn't know if anybody else has any comments, having heard your fellow participants make their observations. Does anybody want to sort of come in and perhaps make some comments at this point? If you do, just put your hand up. Petros.
I think there is a latent pent-up demand. So there's a lot of suppressed energy in the whole system, suppressed by COVID, of course. And I think when things start smoothing, when people start feeling safer, they have their vaccines, and indeed we see that the vaccines actually do work and they don't have any side effects of the real substance. People are ready to get on with business. I'm optimistic. Of course, it's a very tough period and will remain tough for some months to go, but there's a lot of pent-up strength in there. There's a lot of explosiveness in the system, positive explosiveness, and people are ready to go out and do deals. Now, the markets are going to be weeded out by from the weaker players. If you're really weak, you don't have the technology, you don't have the capital, you don't have the brand name, you don't have the distribution and marketing networks, you may not be able to survive. But those who make it, I think will have a very, very good time in terms of capacity to grow. You can see it in the stock markets. One would have expected in very tough times, the general indexes in London, in New York, in China, everywhere would be much weaker. And they're very, very resilient. That's so because the stock market is a very flexible and easy way to smell the sentiment. When things look good, immediately the stock market reacts. And when things are bad, immediately it reacts downwards. The fact that it's resilient and you have various sectors that are doing well despite all the problems shows you that there is this energy there that's waiting to be released.
Mrs. Joshi, do you feel a pent-up energy within the market as well?
Yes, Mr. Clive. In fact, I want to add to what Mr. Chris and Mr. Doukas just said. In fact, only yesterday, late last evening, the World Economic Outlook has come out. And I would like to share with you that after what the Outlook update for January 2021 is talking about, it says that after an estimated 3.5% contraction in 2020, the global economy is actually projected to grow at 5.5% in 2021 and at 4.2% in 2022. And consistent with the recovery in the global activity, global trade volumes are forecast to grow about 8% in 2021 before moderating to 6% in 2022. Now, although we've been talking about the recent vaccine approvals, which have raised hopes of a turnaround in the pandemic later this year, there are challenges because of the renewed waves and the new variants of the virus, which do pose concerns for the outlook. So we need to be safe and secure, and we need to exercise caution because, like Mr. Doukas said, there is a lot of demand, and throughout 2020, throughout the pandemic, as far as the shipping industry is concerned, we are very clear. Chris earlier also said that there is no alternative to shipping when 90% of the goods are by far even today transported by shipping. There is demand for shipping and there are no alternatives to shipping. However, we need to ensure and watch against the pitfalls because while there is the strength of the recovery, there is going to be a lot of challenges in terms of how the variant is going to, whether there are going to be more waves coming in, how we cope up with it. And as Mr. Doukas said, I tend to agree with him. This is going to be very challenging times for weak businesses when we will see a lot of amalgamations happening. And this is actually the time when he's been talking about that a lot of printing is going on. There is a lot of money and liquidity which is being brought into the economies. And this is the time when organizations should actually be going forward and trying to refinance their existing debt and try to get better terms to improve their bottom line. So that is where my optimism comes in, that there are a lot of opportunities. You've got to just and make the right moves. And as far as shipping is concerned, I believe there is no alternative to shipping. I again repeat that. Thank you, Clive.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Joshi. Does anybody else want to come back on anything they've heard?
Yeah, Clive, I just wanted to just continue on what Petros said about the incoming Biden administration. I totally agree with everything he said. I think, obviously, like Trump, Biden's going to be a continued supporter of the Jones Act. So that's going to reserve coastwide trades for vessels built and owned in the States and crewed by US mariners. Sorry. Obviously, I think Biden's background and his ties to organized labor, he's going to be a union supporter, which is more of an issue in the US rather than here, but certainly something that should be considered. But more importantly, I think, he's obviously very, very focused on renewables and the transition from offshore oil and gas exploration to offshore wind energy. He's been very vocal about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if, several of the projects that have been pushed back by the previous administration will be accelerated by the incoming administration as well. So US shipbuilders, from a government perspective, I think will be in a slightly better position than they were. But yeah, I think the drive towards offshore energy and a reduced consumption of fossil fuels will be a big issue in the Biden administration.
Okay. Ibrahim, I think you had your hand up. Wanted to speak.
Yes, well, it's just only a small note, and maybe this is also to support what Chris has just mentioned. Actually, we tend to forget that all these global trade tensions, and especially when it comes to the geopolitical part of it, like this area now in the region, we are considered to be an high-risk area, HRA, because of all the tension. And this, of course, impacts the market because we have two definitions now of the HRA. One is defined by the IMO, and the other one, which is defined by the insurance clubs. And they don't seem to be aligned. And accordingly, because of this thing, we end up paying a high premium in terms of the additional war risk. And this continues to be a challenge for the ship owners and the charters, especially in this part of the world. And I think maybe we should look into having an alignment between these two very important bodies in setting the limits when it comes to the high-risk area.
That's a good point. I think probably highlighted by the recent piracy issues, and I think we thought piracy had gone away, but it never has gone away, of course. But it has resurfaced, and something we need to focus on again. Nasser, there was a mention there about containers and shortages of containers and containers getting disrupted, and certainly in the UK, I think we've seen quite a bit of disruption because of container imbalances. Is your sense that the container sort of logistical supply chain is getting back to normal and containers are in the right places, or is there still some way to go on that to overcome that challenge?
Well, we have noticed in the last quarter of last year, China, they have started to pull all the empties back. And now we have started to understand why that happening. At that time, the shipping rate, it was so low. And if you look at the shipping rate today, it went back. So the container business, they started to make some revenue. Usually, when we are starting every year, the beginning of the year, we start slow, especially when the Chinese New Year comes. Then after in March, the volume start to pick up because the production goes back and the exports from China worldwide starts to to float in the market. So we can see that the container business, they will start to make money, and they will start to recover their losses gradually, and it will depend on the market demand. Also, we are looking to the Expo 2020 of Dubai, which was supposed to happen last year, and this is also will drive the imports to UAE. So overall, we are a bit positive on this side.
Okay. Before we move to our break, Ali Shehab, I know one of your passions is environmental issues, and I just wondered, when we're looking at that question, 2021, a year of opportunities, do you still see it being a year of opportunities in terms of shipping industry making a contribution to the climate change agenda? I mean, it's a very important year. We've had the Biden administration coming back into the Paris Accords. We've got the COP26 conference in Scotland in November. Is it going to, are ship owners and ship managers, is their headspace in the right place to take the necessary action to reduce climate emissions, or are they just going to be looking at getting shipping back into a better commercial state?
So let's look at it this way. So since the time of the start of the pandemic until today, so what was said, what used to happen? So they said, it was winter, and they said the COVID-19, it will not survive in a 25 degrees environment. And then we had the summer, which here in Kuwait, above 50 degrees, and it was there, strong. And so for every expectation, for every prediction that we have put as far as the COVID-19 behavior going to be, we failed. It's just changed from 19 now into variant, and then, which part of it? Is it from Africa? Is it from Europe? Is it the UK? And then there's so many of them, they started to label them and tag them to differentiate them, right? And also, when we look at the situation now, compare it to back in last year in March, compare it to May, compare it to July, and then come to December. So basically what happened now is you just went back, yeah? So they called it second wave, and some places reached third wave, some places reached 4 waves. With all that happening, the regulation was not, the committees continued to meet in the IMO. The EU, I think it's because of the lockdown, they had more time to work, and then they just started to work more aggressively on issuing the regulation. What's happening here? We are busy with COVID, trying to save people, and then all of a sudden, IMO approved this new emission, set targets, and then the EU is just working very hard on that. I mean, for people who work close to Europe, they forget about China. China is moving very fast as well and very strong on the regulation, and they're setting their own targets. And that's going to be a challenge for us in the future. So at the moment, Chris, just before he mentioned, and also Ibrahim mentioned about organizations is going to be merged, downsized, and it's because for obvious reasons. This the economy. And this COVID-19 situation has affected the economy so much, and then you cannot maintain this size going the way forward. You have to downsize and reshape your business and make it to be sustainable. While the regulation at the same time is just also coming close to you, the requirements are there. So previously, when we come into writing the specifications or wherever new regulation is concerned, we say keel laid or contract signed or whatever. Today they talk about EEXI, and we're talking about existing ships, and that's the dilemma at the moment. Ships, fair enough. At least I can talk on our part in KOTC. Our vessels are all meeting the regulatory requirements as far as the emissions subject, the low sulfur fuel, and also the EEDI requirements. However, with the EEXI, now it's talking about, no, you have to do more as far as the existing ships are concerned. And this is quite a challenge, especially with the current time. Everybody, okay, you can be in a lockdown, work on writing the regulation, force it, push it. But then I need the R&D, I need the manufacturers, I need the docks, I need the technical expertise to work with me. Fair enough, we have now shifted into more of a virtual world and we can work with that. Nevertheless, is not enough because you still need, as we mentioned before, there's logistics to do with surface engineers, technical experts to come over and do this and do that. So I can see this is quite challenging the way forward. You know, the heart is there to maintain the ambition for much cleaner and safer operation to reduce the emissions. Nevertheless, what we have, the reality of the situation is we're going to be stuck down the road. And then, you know, there will be like a kick the can kind of a situation, is that they will set targets, i.e. IMO, EU, and then they will just push it back depending on the situation ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ali. We have Trevor Pereira joining us again, and also Abdul Karim Al Musabi. Welcome to you both. I'm just going to hand over Trevor to say a few words before we move on to the next section of the webinar. Over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you, Clive. Thank you, Clive. Hello once again, everyone, and a warm welcome to Captain Abdul Karim Al Musabi, the CEO of ADNOC Logistics and Services. And these special few minutes are for none other than our colleague, our friend, and our dear brother, Mr. Ali Shehab, who will be retiring at the end of this month from his position at KOTC after a distinguished career of 35 glorious years. So before I invite Captain Abdul Karim to say a few words on behalf of the industry and to bid you farewell, Ali, from me to you, Ali, thank you very much for your friendship. I wish you and your family the very best for the future, and God bless. Captain Abdul Karim.
Thank you, Trevor, and good afternoon, everybody. Hi, Ali, Petros, Chris, Joshi, Ibrahim, Nasser. So I think it goes without saying that you will be greatly missed anyway, regardless. So, Ali, I think as an acknowledgement for Ali Shehab being a pioneer and an industry figure, and I think all of us have known Ali for the past 10 years or 20 years, from his dedication, commitment, loyalty to this industry. And I get to know Ali by coincidence. One day I was trying to rent a house in South Shield, Newcastle, and they told me this beautiful house belongs to Ali Shehab. And he was a third engineer in KOTC. So I rang him and I called him that time saying, can I rent your house? And gracefully he gave me that house for a year. So I know Ali personally for many, many years. I think his role and his contribution to the industry cannot be measured. And seriously, his, I would say, diligent approach towards especially the environment. And this is, I'm sure that it is his favorite topic. Whenever he presents something, Ali goes in his own way, and you can see that Ali is becoming Ali. Okay, it's by himself, without trying to be artificial, or maybe sometimes like us trying to make some nice presentations. But Ali is Ali, and we all thank him for being Ali. And I think we liked him as being Ali, as a brother, as a colleague, as an industry figure. And I can tell you that on behalf of my colleague here, I'm sure they will like to say a few words, that you will be greatly missed. I'm sure that you will not disappear. I'm sure we can meet, and especially for me and you, we can meet in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, whenever you are. But from the deepest inside our hearts, we would like to say thank you very much. Thank you very much for all your contribution throughout this rich time that you spent with us. So thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you very much, Captain, and thanks, Trevor. You caught me by surprise here. Also, Ms. Joshi and everybody on the panel. It is departure from KOTC, but I remain to be even having a stigma on my forehead like KOTC, and that will never be, wiped away. However, I will remain to be in the marine industry. I will bother you every now and again, so watch out for that corner. If you're not looking, I'm just in the, there. I'm going to hit you with that question. We in KOTC, we are part of KBC, Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, and we have a rule. If you complete a 35 years of service, it is time for you to move on. And here we have some restructuring happening, and there is what we talked about before. So KOTC will become part of a bigger game. Will be part of KBC International Marketing, and KBC International Marketing is the sales, the chartering, the marine operations. So this will merge with us, and we will be now similar to our brothers in the peer companies here in the GCC, Bahri, ADNOC, and Oman Shipping. And in this regard, there will be a new acting CEO, and he's the Managing Director of KBC International Marketing, Mr. Abdel Nasser Al Busaeedi. And I think, frankly, that my humble thought and vision for the future, it's a good decision for KOTC, and it will only get better. As far as I'm concerned, I'll be around, and I will be here for your assistance, advice, whatever that you may need me for. I'll be at your disposal. Similarly, I will be active in other directions, and let's wait for the good news. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Ali.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, and best of luck. I think we're all very jealous that you're retiring, but also we're sad that you're going. But
I'm not retiring. I'm going to be still working, but I'm leaving. Okay. I'm leaving the civil servant situation, the chair. Okay. We'll be more into the private area. Yeah.
And sometime you could tell us whether Abdul Karim was a very good tenant or not. But maybe we'll leave that for another time, perhaps. But Trevor, did you want to say a few more words before we move on to the commercial break?
I just wanted to ask Ali. He said he's been working for 35 years. So I wanted to ask him: did he start working when he was 10 years old? And this was child labor or something?
I was 17 and a half. Yeah, I left from high school, came to KOTC. So then started as an engineer cadet, and the way we go. It was a fantastic journey, and it's a long story, very nice long story.
Okay. Excellent, bro.
On behalf of all of us, we thank you for all your help and cooperation, and we wish you well with whatever you do next. And I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear from you, as you say. So I think we'll move into a short commercial break now. There'll be some messages by our sponsors, so just stay where you are, don't do anything, and then when we come back, I'll try and collate some questions that we've received from our global audience and put them to our panelists. So
the winds of change shape the course of our industry. The waves are unpredictable, but we ride them towards promising shores when we come together and move in one direction. We challenge the headwinds and anchor our place in the future. We turn the tide. We steer ahead. We stand out, and we won't stop there. Because what matters most is the impact of our achievements. Impact that pushes us and inspires us to go beyond. We are Abu Dhabi Ports. We are united in our vision.
welcome back. Thank you very much to our sponsors. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we couldn't do these webinars without the support of our colleagues in the industry, and we thank Abu Dhabi Ports, ADNOC, LNS and CSP Abu Dhabi Terminals for their continued support. I'm just going to hand over to Nasser Al Busaeedi. He wanted to make some opening remarks, or some opening remarks for this session anyway.
Yeah, please. First of all, I would like to wish our friend and colleague, Mr. Ali, all the best. And of course, we'll miss you and meeting you. Maybe, but as Captain Abdul Karim said, probably going to meet you in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, inshallah. Allah يحفظك ويوفقك إن شاء الله طال عمرك وبنتلاقى أكيد يعني.
أكيد إن شاء الله.
Allah يسلمك. And I would like to take this opportunity as well to present this one and to our friend, this I keep forgetting the names.
Trevor?
No. Sorry, to the organizer. I can't see him. Where is he?
He's not there. Trevor, do you want to? It's Trevor Pereira.
Yeah.
I think you're referring to. Trevor, do you want to join us? Trevor online? I don't know. Maybe he's gone and is doing other things. Maybe I can be Trevor stand-in for the.
Yeah. Clive is as handsome as Trevor.
I'll be the. Imagine I'm Trevor anyway.
Okay, please accept this one from us and from the terminal for the first year achievement. We're doing it virtually, and this is kind of some from our side to you guys.
Oh, well, it's really appreciative. I mean, it's nice to know that what we're doing is going down well, and that looks a very fine memento. So I'm sure Trevor will find a place in the office in Dubai to put that in centre stage. So thanks very much. No, we do appreciate the feedback that we get, and we hope that what we're doing is useful. So if it is, then we're happy to be part of this. So just picking up some of the questions that have come in online. One of them's from a gentleman, Abdul Aziz Al Kohi, who's asking that the global and advanced economic GDP projection, I don't know if that's an official body, is 100% better in 2021 than 2020. I mean, I suppose that's something that perhaps Petros was alluding to. How will this affect the marine industries with COVID still in our environment? And maybe that's when I come to Petros first. I mean, is the economic, GDP growth going to have the corresponding benefit to marine industries, given the fact we're still going to have to live with COVID in the system, as it were? Do you see it happening? I think, are you muted, Petros? I think you might be muted. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Right. It's going to be a slow and uphill process. We have all the problems with the crews being able to go to and from the ships. You're having this China issue that we need to address, but definitely we should start from the second half onwards to see visible progress. We would have expected many more people to have been vaccinated. We have by now been accustomed to work this pandemic. People are used to doing some work despite the pandemic. So my feeling is yes, but it's going to be a slow process. Once this is over, then we have what I call explosiveness. But for the next few months, it's still going to be a tough time. Also depending on the amount of oversupply of ships, depending how many ships come and enter into the market from the shipyards, and how many are going for scrapping or are idle. So my feeling is, yes, we'll definitely see better days for shipping, but it's not going to be in the first half of this year. It may take some more time. From June onwards, I would tend to think. Now, of course, everything is being discounted. Once you know something will happen in 10 months, you start discounting it in advance. But I think that discounting will happen sometime after this coming June.
A lot of commentators are saying, well, look at what happened after the Spanish flu in the early part, or after the First World War, and the bounce back that happened in the 1920s. do you see a sort of, a sort of roaring 20s? Do you see that sort of rapid economic growth that we saw sort of 100 years ago replicating itself?
Well, there's a lot of defensive mechanisms in world trade now. We have Russia on the sidelines, we have Iran on the sidelines, China, US are not doing very well. But if we start getting freer trade, I think the explosiveness will be even greater. Without freer trade, we're going to have much faster growth rates, but not what we would have under free trade conditions. And I'm also the chairman of ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce Greece. We're working very closely with the International Chamber of Commerce in the UAE, and we're all fighting for better conditions for free trade. So my feeling is, because of the trade restrictions, we won't have the same amount as to what happened after the Spanish flu, but it will be there. I mean, growth will definitely be there because there's a lot of energy in the people that has been squeezed, and the spring is ready to bounce back. So I'm quite optimistic. I would wish there was more free trade with China and Russia. I repeat the Russia case, because it will help world growth accelerate at a much faster pace.
Okay, thank you, Petros. Another question that came in while we were having our break was from a gentleman, Nigel Fernando, and it's referring to the Qatar blockage, which is something of the past now. I mean, I'm not going to go into the politics of this, but the question he asks is, are terminals and shipping companies moving containers to Qatar just as the airlines have commenced? I don't know, Nasser Al Busaeedi, is that a comment you're willing to pick up? Are you seeing the start of movements to Qatar after the, I'm sure everybody agrees, welcome resolution of some of the issues that have existed?
Well, yes, now the destination to Hamad Port is going back to normal, and probably we're going to start in the coming 2 or 3 weeks to receive containers, send back containers to Qatar as well. This is also will increase our frequency in the terminal, as well the exchange the cargo between 2 countries. So yes, it's going back to normal.
So yeah, good. So hopefully that's something that will help regional trade, because I think it's been a bit of a barrier. Mrs. Joshi, one of the online people referred to the plans to privatise SCI shareholdings. I'm not sure where it is. One reads about it in the press. Do you want to give us an update on that, and how you see the process helping the Shipping Corporation of India, and indeed what implications does it have for the whole of the Indian maritime sector?
Mr. Clive, currently the disinvestment process is going forward, and the expression of interest is now due to be received on the 13th of February. So we are just a couple of days away from the expression of interest. Once the expression of interest is received, pursuant to that, these bids shall be technically evaluated, and then once the shortlisting is done, after that, there will be a non-disclosure agreement which will be signed with the prospective bidders, and we in the data room for a more due diligence by all the prospective bidders, basis which the bidders will then be able to give us a final financial bid for the signing of the sale purchase agreement and for the financial closure of the transaction. So this is the way the transaction is currently listed. So the major milestone which we all look forward to is just close to the Valentine's Day, just one day prior to that, on the 13th of February, we look forward to what expression of interests the Government of India is going to receive for their strategic disinvestment in the Shipping Corporation of India, along with management control. And you wanted to know how this is going to impact the maritime sector in the Indian context. So I'm sure Ali Shehab, being part of the government, will agree with me that while there are certain advantages of being as part of the government, I think what the government is trying to do is trying to unshackle the Shipping Corporation of India and free it of all government shackles which are there inherent in a government organization, and leave it to free trade and to allow it to grow the way a commercial organization can actually grow without any government intervention whatsoever. I would like to tell the audience and the panelists that Shipping Corporation of India does not get any subsidy or any support whatsoever from the government. We are completely self, and so we as such do not get any of those benefits which in terms of funding or subsidies or anything. So we are currently competing in the open market for all the business. So I think it's a very positive step in terms of trying to unshackle us of any limitations that we would be having as a government organization. So I hope, Clive, I have answered your question.
No, definitely you have. That's very fulsome, and I'm sure people will find that very interesting. We look forward to what happens next in the SCI journey. Ibrahim Al Nadhairi, a question here was, did you have to change the strategic plan and subsequently your key performance indicators after COVID? And where do you think the company is going, and what are your objectives for the current year? So I suppose it's just a reflection on how did COVID affect what your strategic plans for last year and your KPIs, and what are you looking forward to 2021?
Well, a great question. This is a good one. As a matter of fact, the way we see it, that this is an ongoing process. I mean, the market's cyclicity necessitates that an agile response for us, like ship owners or even ship repairers. As the market, tend to change, we need to also be flexible to work that change as well. And when it comes to our strategies, of course, strategies, they are plans. And that's why they are called plans, because you can change them from time to time. But of course, you need to have the right tools to do it. And most important of it is basically the ease of process and the governance as well, being a government company. So yes, we did change our strategy, but we also made sure that we did it in order to meet our vision and mission targets. So we did not touch the vision and the mission of the company, but we did change the strategy or tuned it a little bit. But when it comes to where we are going and what sort of objectives we're aiming, basically we are going towards continuing our diversification in terms of the shipping company. We would continue to modernize our fleet. We will add capacity to it. We will continue to optimize in our operational cost. This is a must. And this is the way we see it going forward in terms to remain competitive in the market. And as for the shipyard, we will continue to improve our capabilities and start new ventures. We are planning to go for the building of tugboats and industrial repairs as well. This is also one of our major targets for this year. And we have already started the initial process to go on that. So our milestone for the shipyard is basically to move a little bit more from the repair, being a ship repair yard, to going into a little bit of shipbuilding in terms of the tugboats and small boats. As a joint objective for both companies is basically to make use of all the opportunities that we have and to enhance our bottom line towards the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Last time we spoke online, I think you were about to take delivery of your 2 new ships. Did that happen on schedule despite COVID, and are they operating as you planned for them to be?
Yes, we did. We actually took delivery of one ship in October, one in November, and as a matter of fact, we're taking delivery of one ship tomorrow. We've just finished the naming ceremony this morning, and tomorrow we are going to take delivery of the 3rd ship from DSME.
Okay, well, we look forward to some details. We can include that in the Maritime Standard. Thanks very much. Nasser Al Busaeedi, a question here is about how did cargo volume develop at Abu Dhabi Terminal during COVID-19? I mean, did you reach any notable milestones? Perhaps you could just reflect on, I mean, obviously it was a difficult year, but did you still achieve the growth that you hoped for?
Well, yes, we did reach our targets and the set budget. We haven't revised the budget at all. Last year, it was around the set budget was around 660,000 TEUs, and we have delivered them. This year, we're looking at the same number as well, with a increase of 5 or maybe 6% on that number as well. Actually, the concern was on the terminal performance, especially when you get some people getting infected with COVID. So also we have monitored our KPI as well. We haven't revised them because end of the day, it will impact the vessel turnaround time and the gate movement as well, which we don't want to touch. But in the pipeline as well, there is an automation is coming up very soon of 2 key cranes. They're going to be automated, including truck automation as well. So we're going to have like 10 or 15% of the terminal is fully automated, starting from the quay to the yard. It's going to be all automated. So this is one of the things that probably will be looked at it in the future to overcome such challenges, especially when it comes to the manpower.
And did I read somewhere that you'd actually achieved, was it a number of hours without any injuries or lost time? Was it quite an impressive performance, if I remember?
Yeah, we did actually. We have reached around 2 million men working hours without an LTI, and that was from the starting of the terminal itself in at the beginning in 2019 till date. So they came together. The 1 million TEUs and 2 million working hours, safe working hours, they came together in the last year, December. And they were the major milestones that we have delivered since we have commissioned the terminal.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you achieved some great things last year despite the pandemic. Chris, sorry to have left you for a little while there. One of the things that was mentioned earlier on was the low emission control agenda and how that might be affected. I mean, obviously ABS is very closely involved in things like, you know, the environmental retrofits, as well as designing ships for low emissions. I mean, how do you view the development of maritime policy at the moment, and what input is ABS making into that process?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, obviously protection of the environment is one of the 3 pillars of the ABS mission, along with property and life. So sustainability in general is absolutely core to what we do, and in that sense we obviously totally support regulatory change that supports that initiative. The challenge is, and Ali mentioned it earlier, is having a regulatory regime that's proactive and fit for purpose. So obviously with ABS's requirements and our rules, they're ours, so we can amend them relatively easily. But when you're trying to change the course of a behemoth like the IMO, it takes time, and it's difficult to do. Obviously, the challenge that they've set, the IMO set for us, is the 2030 and 2050 goals. They are stretch targets, absolutely. I mean, they're going to be a challenge to meet. Again, Ali mentioned about the challenges that existing fleets have with EEXI. So I've got the numbers here. As it stands today, 87% of the bulk carrier fleet are non-compliant or will not be compliant with EEXI when it enters into force. 85% of the tanker fleet, 88% of the container fleet, and 95% of the gas fleet. Wow. So it's pretty significant, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done to close that gap, and obviously that's something that ABS can support with, for sure. We've got a range of services that we can support our clients with. But But yeah, with EEDI and EEXI and obviously MEPC 75 last November, the targets that have been set are ones that we are focusing on supporting our clients with. And obviously this is all based against the 2008 goals. So we're looking at things like carbon reduction and carbon intensity as well. But it's important that we have the right perspective as it relates to these kind of things, because, you know, we might say that there are improvements have been made in carbon reduction or carbon intensity, but actually it's important that you look from well to wake, so along the entire chain of that process. So extracting the oil from the ground until it's burnt and used by the vessel. You know, if we look at it from that perspective, then we have a more accurate representation of where we actually stand. Again, different sectors are going to be affected differently. So if you look at gas ships, for example, you know, one of the proposals for reducing environmental performance is slow steaming. With gas ships, it doesn't work particularly well because the slower you go, the more boil off gas you've got. So the more you need to burn or vent or use the reliquefaction plant, which obviously takes more energy. So there's a massive number of complexities involved in this. But yeah, ultimately, look, any development that is going to improve the safety or environmental outcomes of the global fleet is good. But fundamentally, like I said, they've got to be fit for purpose and relevant, and not too delayed. And like I said, when you've got to put them through the IMO and get the buy-in from a lot of different parties, it's sometimes not always the case.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I think so. You highlighted the fact there's a long way to go, and perhaps a short time to do it in. And I think that's one of the concerns that bottlenecks may build up, certainly amongst shipyards. There's the message there. I think I'm sure you know, Ibrahim will echo that really owners need to sort of be liaising with their yards to get some of this necessary work done, or they'll not have the capacity to deal with it. Ali, I mean, actually, this question links in with what Chris was talking about. Was, you know, how much of a priority for KOTC is reducing fuel consumption, and has that priority changed? I suppose the inference of the question is that, you know, with cheaper fuel, have owners perhaps not been so motivated to reduce fuel costs? I suspect for KOTC the answer is that is still a priority, but is that true?
There is so much regarding the environment yet to be seen. I'm talking about regulation here, and then whatever schemes that's going to be finalized at the end. I mean, today, even if the fuel is cheap, that doesn't mean, you know, okay, for a VLCC, you burn 100 tons almost of fuel oil. That's too high. We work our level best really to reduce it. And there is so much of a technology available today that you really can help you in trying to get it down. So most of the work should have been done at the earlier stage of the, you know, design stage and before the construction. Now, post-construction, the solutions would be, you know, sort of limited, but they are there available. But the maximum you could hit with reducing your fuel consumption is also marginal, but it can be substantial when the time of the fuel oil was expensive. However, we as KOTC, we continue to strive. There are so many projects that we have done to have energy-saving devices and waste heat recovery systems, trying to work with things to reduce the fuel consumption. And it varies from one case to another. So some are 5%, some are 6%, some up to 10%. That's when you start screening your whole different disciplines in your fleet, different ships, etc. And then based on that profile, this profile, then you come up with the different solutions. But remains that if we don't work on it sooner, that the future carbon trading schemes, taxation, whatever is going to happen, don't forget that some time ago, this EU MRV IMO DCS, all these requirements, when they came into play, basically is really to put the meter on the funnels and measure exactly how much the emission is happening. So data of the 2007, 2008, later in 2011, 2013, but that's all, you know, it's more than 10 years ago. Comparing to what we have today, there will be substantial data where the regulatory bodies and the decision makers, they will come up with very harsh requirements, and ship owners will by then find themselves stuck with that, you know, heavy bill if they have not done certain measures in comparison, i.e. what a standard normal VLCC should do or should consume, should emit, and then, you know, for that different category of vessels, etc. So I think most of the responsible ship owners have been working on this for many, many years, and we are set for that, but there is still more to come in the way forward. But I wanted to comment on something, you know, like just before when Chris was talking, Nasser, and also Ibrahim, about, you know, how about the environment, about the regulation, about how things will be happening in the future. And there is something that's coming that will turn around the whole industry. I mean, at the moment, when we look at the GCC, the different and the size of projects that are happening in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, then when you talk about UAE and what's happening in UAE, when you're talking about what's happening in Qatar, and it's a fantastic comeback of Qatar into the GCC, and the GCC coming back to each other, that is creating some fantastic opportunities of collaboration, of trade, of, you know, it's unimaginable how much that this will bring positivity into the system, but mainly when it comes into Qatar new LNG project, because the industry today is really at a standstill. And that project, you know, having almost, I think it's, you know, if I say the number correctly, it's 100 LNG is the target on a very diversified landscape of different shipyards in the world. So what we are suffering from today is that really shipyards are suffering. There's not much of orders really to get the system to be moving. So then when you have the value chain, all these manufacturers, all those equipment makers, the R&Ds will start. So for all those set targets, we're going to have something totally different, something totally new, because the cash will be coming. That will generate the energy within the system. And I think, you know, within the next 5 years, there's going to be some fantastic news as far as the industry is concerned. But I think the catalyst for all of that is that LNG project that's going to happen.
That's very interesting observations. Petros, perhaps come to something slightly different tack here about the future. And this gentleman emailed a question. There's been a lot of tension with China in the West right now, with Hong Kong and the Uyghurs, and also with Russia. Should the shipping world be worried about possible sanctions? I mean, let's hope not. But what do you feel that things could get a little bit difficult for the shipping industry going forward?
I think not. I think we've seen pretty much close to the worst of the sanction business. I think, for example, Russia gets sanctions for things that are unimportant. I mean, sometimes Russia is not working to its own benefit. And therefore, that makes life easier, because with certain improvements, the sanctions could be lifted. Because, for example, Western Europe wants to trade with Russia more freely. It's a big market for European companies because of their proximity. And I'm sure China wants to do the same thing. Even though, as I said, Russia has a GDP which is the sum of Belgium and Spain and a little bit less. So sometimes you think it as a hyper superpower, but the GDP doesn't seem to be there. At any rate, the lifting of sanctions with Russia and with some goodwill could help world trade quite a bit. Similarly with China, but again, the thorny issues are not just the Uyghurs and Hong Kong and human rights and Taiwan, it's also this competition for preeminence in the high-tech world, and particularly in the artificial intelligence world, which has alarmed the United States. My feeling is that we will not see more sanctions. We will see, because of Biden's predisposition, a gradual lifting of them, a gradual smoothing, but it will be gradual. It's not going to be March or April this year. That's why I said there's a lot of potential for world growth, but we still have to wait a little bit for it. But it's not going to get any worse, other than the worsening of the pandemic, finding new strains for which the vaccine doesn't work, things of that sort. And because people are tired now of being locked down, they won't be very, very attentive to the lockdown measures. I mean, they will try to break them, because there's been a year now where people are locked up in apartments and what have you. Schools are also locked down. And it's not easy for people to live under certain conditions. So some of them will say, "Que sera, sera," you know, I'll be out there, and if I catch it, hopefully it will be a mild, asymptomatic kind of strain, rather than going to the hospital and being in the intensive care. So with that in mind, my feeling is what we said before. Yes, there will be growth, but it will take some time until, you know, growth will be smooth and then it will lift. For the time being, it's just going to be the smoother phase starting this coming June, I would expect.
Okay, thank you, Petros. Ali, you had your hand up. You wanted to come back on something that had been said?
I just want to add to what Petros was saying. Countries and people are really tired because the situation is just prolonging. Months ago, we were very worried, and you know, when we look at the situation globally and look how the lockdowns have affected the local economies, you know, I mean, the UK, add to that Brexit coming in between. So, what's happening in Dutch? In Holland, what we were worried about some time ago is actually the social unrest, because this pandemic and the freezing of the economy in the way that it is happening. I mean, people going to job, getting their income, and their income, then they're living their normal life, etc. But that's all being disturbed, and there is a great concern that some social unrest that will pop up here and there, and I believe. Some countries in Europe now, it's been having like 4 or 5 days of riots that's been taking place, and God forbid, but that might also continue to happen. However, but I take that example and apply it on a greater context around the world, and you will find that what kind of a sentiment that brings is everybody is tired, everybody exhausted, and what they need is for things to normalize. Now, geopolitics are very much there, but governments, and especially like the superpowers, and I think that there will be some kind of like when things get, let's pass the most difficult part of the pandemic coming towards the end. I think there will be somehow of a normalization for economy just to revive itself and trade to take its normal course, until the politicians will start working and making noise again down the road. But I think today everybody is exhausted, and there is an appetite for let's get back into business. Now, if that really do happen in the way we see it, for the shipping industry, it's a fantastic rebound and comeback game. That's just what I wanted to add. I think I align with you, Petros, right?
Okay. Thanks, Ali. Thanks for those remarks. I think I've got time to ask everybody one more question from the audience, and then we'll wrap up. Time is marching on. Mrs. Joshi, I mean, I think one of the bright spots of Indian shipping is the coastal shipping market. This commentator asked, how do you foresee the future of coastal shipping in India? And what's SCI's plan in terms of overall expansion? I presume that's in connection with coastal shipping. Is coastal shipping going to be a sort of big boost for Indian maritime?
Yes, Mr. Clive, we do agree that coastal shipping is going to be bright for the Indian subcontinent, since we have a very long coastline which is along both India's west coast as well as the east coast. Coastal shipping is of immense importance for the Indian economy, and trade in both dry bulk commodities such as iron ore, coal, etc. is a major contributor to the coastal shipping, which is now followed by movement of crude oil and petroleum products and container trade as well. And as you would know, there is a flagship program of the Government of India, which is known as the Sagarmala program, which is under the Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, which is to promote port-led development in the country through harnessing this long coastline. And there are a lot of initiatives which the ministry and the Government of India is taking under the Make in India policy and the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiatives. And we consider that there is going to be very good prospects even in terms of the container shipping going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Joshi. Sorry, Ibrahim Al Nadhairi. Question here from one of our people online. Do you think there'll be a strong bounce back in tanker markets this year? I think we've heard that tankers are a little bit of an unknown factor. What's your view?
Well, it will still remain an unknown factor, as you said. But anyway, what we think maybe towards the Q3 and Q4, things will ease a bit. The refineries right now are not running in full capacity because of course, known reason of COVID, lack of demands due to restricted flights, increasing oil prices. All these things, they will not continue forever. So at one stage, they will have to stop, and things will have to go back to, to ease up basically. And I think at one stage, demand will open up, and in terms of the market, the tanker market will start coming back in line, and we expect that to be towards the end of Q3 and beginning of Q4 this year, but not before that, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. Nasser Al Busaeedi, this is an interesting question. I mean, coronavirus changed our behaviours and also the work environment, but what's the most important lesson we have learned, in your opinion? I mean, obviously, we're all working in a very different way, and I'm sure the same is true in the ports and terminal sector. What's the most important lesson that you've learned?
Well, it was at the beginning it was a bit not clear, but later on it was just trying to find the opportunity in each, in every corner. And that was part of our success, that we have handled that number of volume, at the same time keeping our employees safe. I mean, it was things that we came to learn, all of us, in the terminal.
Okay, thank you very much, Nasser. Chris Greenwood. It's a topic we've talked about before on these webinars, but about remote surveys, something that perhaps was unheard of a few years ago, but now is becoming more standard. Can they be expanded more in 2021? Do you think that you'll see that this will become the norm rather than the, just a sort of short-term fix?
Yeah, it's a favorite topic for class societies, right? So we had developed had started developing our remote survey program way in advance of the pandemic, as the kind of industry tended to move towards a more digital approach. But obviously, the program was significantly accelerated as a result of the pandemic, purely because we couldn't get our surveyors to attend because the borders were closed. I think, generally speaking, the remote survey, the acceleration of the use of remote surveys has been one of the biggest evolutions that we've seen during the pandemic. The other obviously being the use of digital and data. So ABS was the first class society to do remote surveys for annual surveys, which is something we're pretty pleased with. And then we have, I forget the exact number, but it's in the early 20s, the number of options we have for remote surveys. They include things like damage surveys, closing findings. So I think there's a time and a place. One thing we do like to stress is that we are not looking to replace surveyors. You cannot beat having an experienced surveyor with their boots on the deck, crawling around the tanks and actually using the Mark 1 eyeball to have a look and see how things are and using their judgment. But there is a time and a place. So for example, you know, remote locations like West Africa, or if for whatever reason we can't get a surveyor on board, it's a really powerful tool that we have, and that's not just to mention the efficiency of it, but also the sustainability side of it. So again, using West Africa as an example, if it takes a surveyor 2 days to travel there, 1 day to do the job, and then 2 days to travel back, you know, you've got the CO2 emissions from flights, from taxis, the equivalent in the hotel. Whereas if I can sit at my computer as a surveyor and subject to the right documentation, photograph, evidence, video being provided, do it without traveling anywhere, then that's a fantastic evolution in the way that we're conducting our business. Now, obviously, there's limitations to it. So we have pretty strict requirements in place about vessel age, about the inability to do repeat remote surveys. So you can only do one every other year. We have to put a surveyor on board on alternate years. And there are obviously issues with transmission of data, live streaming when we need it. But no, ultimately, in summary, the remote survey program is basically a reflection of the demand of the market. And it, by its nature, it will just continue to evolve to meet the needs of the market and the industry.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Ali Shehab, there's a question about has the pandemic meant owners have had to change the way they carry out shipboard training, and are there any positives from that? A big topic, I'm sure, but I don't know if you had some brief observations about how the world of shipboard training or training generally has had to be changed, and are there any positives?
Yes, of course. I think, you know, one of the good side of the pandemic is this thing that people used to say when you ask them, you know, do this, they say, oh, I can't. Bring that, oh, I can't. Let's meet, oh, I can't. You know, today, this is all gone. So it depends how early did you start on setting up your ship-shore connectivity. And as far as KOTC is concerned, and I know that many of my colleagues here, their ships are connected fully. So this MS Teams. So I did a farewell the other day with all my ships, all the fleet, and everybody was there. It was fantastic. And the reason, you know, to be able to do that is because back in 2003, when we were writing the specifications, we were making sure, but at that time there wasn't really, there was only broadband, and then there was not much of service providers that can provide you with that. But imagine that we were really thinking of what we have now in front of us here. We were thinking about it then. Now this is here. If this is like back in 2004, which is more than 15 years ago, and if today we have this technology, so what you need to see another 15 years ahead, and what's going to be the technology like that will help you. So it will be way better than what we are seeing here. So everybody now is talking about 3D. They're talking about, you know, 3D printing, 3D imaging, 3D whatever. So future is going to be very nice. However, when it comes in the training, now everything, obviously, it's all about procedures and how you wrote those procedures. Now, what is the auditing body and what is the certifying body and the accreditation body? All those now, whatever procedures that they have in place, whatever requirements that they have in place, is going to be scrapped. This is all going to be taken as it is, like your procedure. You know, our procedure here in the company, it need to be revisited. A lot of it is not fit for the purpose. If you're going to talk about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you need to think different, because the virtual world is making a greater domination about how you need to operate this ship. So when it comes into the training, there will be a greater connectivity, a greater syllabus list of courses that you can do, i.e. when you go back, what we had only limited CBT training courses certified, but these are like normal training. Now these going to be developed, and what I think is the certifying bodies will have to move and change from the way they require things, because it's going to be impossible for people to go into the UK or go to the Far East or go to the East or go to the West to get their training and get their certification and revalidation, etc. That's no longer fit. Now you need new system. So while I'm saying this, I'm sure that somebody in Glasgow, somebody in downtown Newcastle, or I'm talking about UK here, or maybe in Abu Dhabi as well, in ADMAN, Abu Dhabi Maritime Academy, they are thinking big time today of how really to bridge into the future. And everything is now available. It's just how you customize it with your accreditation, accrediting bodies, and then change into that. So like how the class now, they have electronic certificates, right, Chris? So therefore, now if you go back 3 years or 4 years ago, electronic certificate, you know, let me see how that will come up. But now I need it as a ship owner. Not the class before wanted to go there, but the ship owners are not ready to go there. So, you know, when you consider the subject and you consider the greater picture of, you know, blockchain and how the digital currency is coming into play, and there is a lot going to happen that will make things way much better. Now, things going to happen and make things way much better. I mean, look at concerts. Concerts. Have you been to a concert recently, Clive?
No.
You know, so you know you have the stage, people on the stage, and you have on the ground, people on the ground, right? You know, they changed now. Now they have an airspace bubble. You go in with your friend, and they blow it up, and you just like, you know, in an airspace bubble. You know, it's a big like that, and you're sitting, and you know, and you sort of kind of dancing. Now, who would imagine? I mean, in Spitting Image program or some other, you know, comedy program, they will have a fantastic day about this. But that's the real situation that we have now. People trying to adapt, and the adaptation, as far as the training is concerned, is for you to change what you have said as a yes and a no, and that comes from the accreditation or bodies. And we as ship owners really more welcome, because we did this ship-shore connectivity and we have all the solutions.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I think it's 10:30 now, and so I should try and wind things up. I know some people have to go and they've got other meetings. So I'm just going to go around the table now and just ask, you know, if there was one thing that you were going to hope for in 2021, what would it be? And I'm going to start with Petros, who's on my bottom right-hand corner. What's your one hope for 2021?
Of course, for the vaccines to work and for trade to become smoother and more open, for Biden to go out and start finishing this East-West trade war. If we see that, I think humanity and the ingenuity of people from the Arab world to Canada to Japan to China will figure out ways for prosperity to increase. And one more opportunity for Emirati banks in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and what have you, to become more visible in the international markets. I think they have been very localized, whereas the world expects them to play a much bigger global role. And that could be one of our topics in one of the conferences. The big role that banks can play, because now the system is becoming a bit digital. The big boys have access to capital. The smaller ones who want to do, not the high-tech ones, but the regular ones, shipping, transportation, or what have you, have a much harder time attracting capital. So there is an imbalance there, and there are opportunities to address it. So that's from me.
Okay, thank you very much, Petros. Mrs Joshi, what do you hope for in 2021?
I hope that the teachings of 2021 are followed. I'm sorry, the teachings of 2020 get followed in 2021, and global politics is saner than what it has been. I think we've seen in the past not only the impact of the pandemic, but also a lot of global politics playing havoc with the trade, a lot of trade wars happening, which itself has impacted not only shipping and economic development of a lot of countries, but also it has impacted mankind in a certain way. So I hope 2021 is going to be saner for all of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs Joshi. Ibrahim, you next. What's your wish list? I think you're on mute, are you? Or thank you.
Yeah. Well, for this coming year, I would love to have maybe, perhaps, of course, a safer world in terms of pandemic, having the right treatment for everyone, and most important of all, besides doing very good commercially, I would really pledge to everyone to take the crew welfare and well-being in a more serious manner. This is very important because I keep saying that the crew members on board, they are basically the main drivers behind our success, and we should take care of them.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibrahim. Nasser, over to you.
For sure, to see everybody safe and in a good shape, and at least we can see what happened to 2020 last year with the volume, and we're looking forward to see more artificial intelligence getting involved in our industry. That's all, not too much.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Chris Greenwood, what is your hopes for 2021?
Yeah, I'd like to see the crew change issue resolved ultimately. Obviously, as Petro mentioned, the vaccines, we need them to work, but I'd like to see the crew change issue resolved. I've really been impressed by the sense of sort of community cohesion and partnership demonstrated by the global population as we sort of fight that pandemic. So I'd like to see that continue and be reflected in the maritime industry post-COVID. And then personally, I'd like to be able to spend as much time with my sons as I have in 2021. And travel restrictions to ease so I can fly back to Cornwall and give my mum a hug.
Well, very good. I'm sure we'd all like to do that. So we echo, I'm sure, we echo those thoughts, Chris. And last, but of course not least, Ali Shehab, what's your hopes? Apart from, you obviously got a very interesting year personally ahead, but what are your hopes for 2021?
Have you seen this documentary about the Eurotunnel, when they were digging?
No, I don't think so.
It's a very interesting documentary. But anyway, my late father-in-law, Jim Witherspoon, so when they were digging actually from the two sides, and he used to make fun. He says, this is going to be very funny to see the Frenchmen on the other side, when this wall is, when you start meeting each other, But we are digging, and we want to see what is the other side. I mean, besides hard people for mistaking it for they hanging the monkey. But when it comes into really the expectations, this is a very dark tunnel, and we are going there. But we know that when we get into the other side, this will be something promising. We have come out of this with great resilience. We are still I don't know whether we are in the midway or just before the midway. I don't think we passed the midway of really overcoming the pandemic. But I think there will be a good progress for us as a shipping industry when it comes into, towards the last quarter of this year. It's just a gut feeling. And now if you ask me why, because I can see that there will be a rebound and that the shipping industry will somehow be, obviously, will be the main player of delivering that trade requirements. And we are there ready for it. But again, I join my voice into what everybody said, and especially as far as the crew change and their rights and their vaccination as well.
Good. I think I'll just add 2 points for that. One, I think we all very much hope that the vaccination program is a success, but I think there's a danger that the seafaring community could be left out and fall through the cracks, because who do they belong to? Where are they? They're difficult to reach, aren't they? So I think hopefully the global shipping community and the global political community will ensure that seafarers get their fair share when it comes to vaccination, and are not just left as they so often are. And the second thing I think is mental health. I think mental health is going to be a big priority for all of us at land. But when you think what seafarers both ashore and at sea have to go through for the next year, then I think the industry as a whole needs to make 2021 a year when actually mental health, alongside environmental challenges and getting back to profitability, I think it's got to be up there as a priority for all companies and all organisations. So let's hope that's the case, and that seafarers' contributions are recognised, but they're looked after in the way that they should be looked after. It's quite interesting in the UK. People have suddenly started to realise how important shipping is, because containers are getting delayed at ports. They're costing about 10 times more to get to the UK than they were, and suddenly people are having to pay more money for things and having to wait for things, and suddenly an invisible industry, shipping, is actually getting into the papers. And I think we all need to realise that it takes seafarers to get goods that we value into our homes. So maybe some good will come out of this in terms of people appreciating the value of the shipping industry.
BIMCO, Clive, sorry to interrupt, but BIMCO issued a video publication about this. Very interesting, where they really have demonstrated the commitment of the shipping industry and its people, really despite what the pandemic, how it was going, how difficult it was. But that video is just a fantastic video. I shared it with all the executives, all the team, and everybody really, they realize something that they don't know, i.e. other than the shipping. Also, when it comes into the mental health, I would, ask you to search for the blog of the Secret Captain, and it talks about really how people were suffering big time about, being stranded on board ships, and difficult really to even assist their team. That's just wanted to add, Clive. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I think with that, I'll bring matters to a conclusion. I think the answer to the question, a year of opportunities, has to be a yes, but with qualifications. It's only yes if we do the things that we need to grab them. But I think everybody I've heard around the table today has had some positivity, as well as that sense in the background that things are not going to be easy. So with that, I thank you all for your contributions. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. Thanks to everybody online as well. We're going to make these a sort of regular event, probably monthly now. I think that's the right level of frequency. So we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Look out for the date and the time, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. So with that, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and stay safe.